Good day, my name is Michael Malondo, and I'm going to present on the subject of ethics for HIV/AIDS, looking at the third year higher diploma. And I'm going to discuss the assignment that is expected for you to complete for this specific subject. We are going to look at 8 different assignments and how it's very important for you to follow and to understand what is expected from you, and then what you have to answer for for this subject when you're going to implement or you're going to do this assignment. The first assignment is looking at where you have to list and describe, looking at what normative ethics is all about. First, you have to understand what is normative ethics and how that is being applied in Namibia. And then also you're going to see how does normative ethics contribute to the sense of what people think what is right or wrong. And then of course you're going to use HIV/AIDS as an example. What people think is right and what people think is wrong. So you have to clarify, you have to give example with practical examples. So I'm going to discuss that also in detail, and we're going to look through that assignment. The second assignment is you're going to look at the Bible in the medieval age. Now, you first need to describe and explain what is medieval political thought and how does that apply to the Bible. During the medieval era, what happened and why did people use the Bible, and what role did the Bible play during, and what was the thought or the mindset during the time of the medieval era, and what people believes in, because there were more other beliefs that they had, but you will use the Bible as an example, and you're going to look at the specific era, what the thought was. The third assignment is looking at social contract, and in your assignment you have to explain what is social contract and how it is very important when it comes to today's life, what we call the modern life. You have to explain, give practical examples and explain in details. And then the fourth one is you're going to look at human rights. Specifically, you're going to look at the Namibian context. You use the Namibian constitution, and then you're going to look at human rights from the universal, from an international perspective, and compare the international with the Namibian experience and the Namibian context. Then the fourth assignment is you're going to look at the issue of death penalty. Death penalty as a theme by its own. What is death penalty? And then you're going to look death penalty in Namibia, and then of course you have to link death penalty with other 3 normative principles, and remember when we said in the first assignment where you have to talk about normative principles or normative beliefs, normative so you have to apply that. And then, do you agree or disagree with the death penalty? And if not, why? And give examples, practical examples as much as possible. The sixth assignment is you're going to look at where you're going to look at 2 different religions. You're going to look at the Buddhist belief and at the Christian belief, and the belief that you're going to compare is the afterlife. What do the Buddhists believe in when it comes to afterlife? What the Christian belief? You have to give the comparison. You have to discuss the contrast, and please give examples also as much as possible. The seventh assignment is you're going to look at the rights of people living with HIV/AIDS, and you will also discuss these rights in the context of the Namibian constitution, where you're going to discuss it. And then of course you are going to look again at the social contract, but specifically looking at the views of John Locke as one of the theorist when it comes to the social contract principle. So you will use that, give examples, and of course, when you are going to look at the social contract, you're going to look at what is John Locke's point of view when it comes to the right of citizens in terms of their protection, their respect, and their fulfillment. So those are the 8 assignments that we're going to go. So the first assignment that we're going to look at, normative ethics. Now, just to first understand, you have to understand what is normative. Now, normative ethics is the belief what is wrong or right. That's what ethics is all about. It's your moral belief, your moral conduct, what you know, or what you feel or what you believe is wrong or right. Now, normative is actually an adjective which comes from the word normal or norm, which means what is the norm, what is the standard, what is the rule when it comes to that specific ethical conduct or the ethical beliefs, and what certain norms and standards do people apply or do people exercise as part of the ethical principles. Now, there are different kinds of normative ethics that you can look at. Now, in your assignment, you have to bring out there. So you can either choose one of these different type of normative ethic, or you can talk about the 3. So the first thing is you're going to look at the deontological, where it says it tells you exactly that you've got certain moral duties. These are the moral duties, you have to abide to it. Then the consequential only says is what is the consequences of your action. If you do certain things, there are certain consequences that will follow, and you will be judged by it. Then the third one is the theological type of normative ethics, where you bring in the issue of God, the rule of God. If you behave in certain way, this is what the Bible says, this is what God says, this is what religion say, this is what your belief actually says when it comes to your. So those are the things that you have to discuss in your first assignment. Then you're going to look at the issue of the medieval political. Now, just to talk about medieval. Now, medieval philosophy actually started way back in Western Europe during the Middle Ages. It was one of the most very interesting time of the human race or the human being, and medieval is mostly associated with the Dark Ages, and it was also then associated with the age of oppression and barbaric and barbarism, and where people actually behave as the way how they want. And it was actually during this age, the medieval age, where the Bible actually became a very important book, especially for Christians. And the first book of the Bible that was translated was the Vulgate in Latin, and it was mostly used, and it was actually only the Old Testament that was later on translated, and later on the New Testament. So in your assignment, you have to discuss during the medieval ages, what type of ages was there, and then also bring what was the beliefs or the thought they had during the time. So it's very important that you have to discuss this in detail, so that when you are going to discuss that in your discussion you will bring up the medieval thoughts when it comes to the Bible. Assignment 3 is actually the social contract and model life. Now there are 2 kinds of principles when it comes to social contract. Now, there are different philosophers that actually undertone or support social contract, which is Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Jacques Rousseau, and they've got different perspective when it comes to social contract and the model line. Now, social contract itself is based on 2 principles, and I'm quickly going to go through those principles. But in your assignment, when you are going to discuss social principle, you have to discuss it in respect in the context of our life, in the modern life today. Now, the first one that we get is Pactum Unionis. Now, the Pactum Unionis principle under social contract, what it actually says, it talks about the respect between people. Now, what it actually undertone is that when people are having respect for each other, then there is harmony and there is peace. Now, in the context of modern life, and you might also use it in the context of Namibia. Now, do people respect each other in Namibia? And if we respect each other, why do you say that? In your assignment, you have to give reasons for your answer and examples. And what are the results of this respect? Is there harmony among Namibians? Is there peace among Namibians? And if there is no harmony, why not? If there is no peace, why not? So, and this is where we can bring in the cultural aspect, the ethnicity. We can bring in different cultures. We can talk about different religions in Namibia, different tribes, the issue of tribalism, of nepotism. This is what you have to talk about in your assignment, and give some examples when you talk about pactum unionis, which is very important. The second principle is pactum subjectionis, which actually say for people to be united and to stay as a united nation, specific Namibia, then these people must actually they must obey the authority. And not just obey the authority that's set above them, they must also then surrender their freedom and their right to this authority. And this authority can be the government of Namibia. Now discuss this issue. Are we united in Namibia? And if we are, do we really obey to the constitution, the rules, the regulation, the bylaws of the government? And our freedom, do we surrender our freedom when it comes to our rights as Namibians? So discuss pactum subjectionis as much as possible, because in your assignment you have to give discuss these two different principles and look at it at the context of Namibia, and how that actually also influence Namibia as a country. Then assignment number 4, you are going to look at the Article 21 of the Namibian Constitution. Now, in your assignment, you can talk about the Namibian Constitution. You can explain about what is the Namibian Constitution. Then, of course, which is very important, the Namibian Constitution is talking about the fundamental rights of every Namibian. Now, from your point of view as a student, you must discuss the nature of these rights of Namibians. How is it being exploited? Is it being abused? Is it being adhered to? Or is it being respected? And when we talk about this, we are talking about the fundamental rights, freedom rights of all Namibians. Discuss that in details. And then when you're going to discuss it in your assignment, you have to discuss the advantage, the disadvantage, the success, the failure in Namibia, and with each one you have to discuss with practical example. How does it work? Is it successful? Is it a failure? And if not, why? And you have to give some practical example as much as possible. Then we're going to the assignment number 5, what you have to do, and you have to then discuss the death penalty. Now, the death penalty is a very sensitive subject in Namibia still today. And there are so many scenarios where people are against death penalty, and some people are for death penalty. Now, death penalty is very controversial, as I say, around the world, even in Namibia. And there are 4 basic questions that most people are asking themselves. The first question that people are asking themselves is the death penalty more greater than murder? Secondly, is the death penalty more greater than life in imprisonment without parole? If we say death penalty must be there for people, say if you've committed murder, you killed somebody else and you go to jail, must you get parole or not? or must you be put in jail for life? Now, is the death penalty and the life imprisonment the same thing, or is it two different things? This is one of the first questions that people are asking all around the world. The second question that people also ask, the death penalty, how can you apply the death penalty when it comes for example, to the offenses? Now, can death penalty in certain instances also be described as a discriminatory way or a way to discriminate certain people? So this is a second question. I say, is death penalty discriminating certain offenders or not? The third one is, what are the risks that if you have the death penalty that you might execute an innocent person? You go to court and without reasonable doubt you are actually then found guilty in a court of law and you go to jail. It can be circumstantial evidence, it can be factual evidence, but at the end of the day, what if you are really innocent and you did not commit the crime? Should death penalty be then put on you? What are the risks that somebody innocent can be executed? The fourth question that people are asking all around the world, for example, is the whole issue of if you are giving somebody who's a convicted murderer, and this person after a few years or after longer period or whatever is then put on parole, which means he is granted parole to go out before he can finish his life sentence. What are the chances that this person can kill again? So these are some of the questions that you have to ask yourself. Now, there are certain things that you have to look at now. There is a principle, and it's a very important principle which people are using. They call it lex talionis, which is a Latin word which says an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a life for life. What it actually says is somebody killed, then you must be killed. If somebody cut off your ear or your hands, then that person's ear must also be cut off, his hands must also. So whatever that person do to another human being, that must also be done to him or her. So this is the whole principle of lex talionis, and the death penalty actually look into that. Now, when we look at the death penalty, we must also look at the issue of the principle of goodness. Now, the principle of goodness, it's a concept that's being applied and being discussed throughout the world. And what this principle actually says, that be good even if a person is a murderer. By applying the principle of goodness, that you allow this person not to get the death penalty, or you say because of principle of goodness that the innocent victim that was killed, because of that, to show goodness to the victim, you have to apply death penalty to the offender or the murderer. So this is what the principle of goodness is arguing, whether it's the death penalty or not the death penalty, and where do you show goodness, to the victim or to the offender? Now, there is a lot of theory, and what the realist theories are actually saying, that when you apply the principle of goodness, you actually benefit everyone. And then the other aspect is does evil harm the innocent one, and what attempt is there to harm the innocent one? So this is something that you can also bring out in your discussion and in your assignment. So in the context of Namibia, you have to discuss the death penalty and how the death penalty does play a role, whether it's good, whether it's bad, the advantage, disadvantage. So, and then also the principle of goodness. So it's very important. Now, assignment number 6 is looking at the contrast between Buddhism and Christianity. And you're going to look at the theme of the afterlife. When people are going to die, what's going to happen? Is there life after death? And this is a very philosophical question that everyone is asking and everyone is believing in. There are certain people that believe that there is no life after death. And there are certain people who believe there is life after death. Now, you are in your sermon, you are giving two different religions or two beliefs where you must bring out the beliefs or the belief of the Buddhists, where they discuss the afterlife, and then the Christian belief where they discuss in the afterlife. So the first thing is you defined what afterlife is for the Buddhists, you define what afterlife is for the Christian. The second thing is you're going to compare, are there certain beliefs between the Buddhists and the Christians that are the same? Then the third one that you need to bring out in your assignment is you have to discuss the contrast. Is there any contrast? Is there any conflict where they disagree? Is there any disagreement between the Buddhists or the Christians when it comes to afterlife? Now, for the sake of this presentation, I'm just going to give you a snapshot on the belief of the Buddhists and the Christians and the ideas about afterlife. Is the Buddhists believe that there is life after death, and they feel that life after death can only be reached through the way of karma, or what they call, and then the karma is what they believe is the way to reach that life is through the nirvana, or what they call the rebirth. Now the karma is actually whatever you have done in your life during your lifetime. If you were a bad person, that after your death you will become also your penalty will also be bad. But if you are a good person and you show goodness to people, when you die, that after your death, you will be rewarded with goodness. And this is where the whole issue comes in, that karma will always follow you. So whatever you do in today's life, it will come back to you. Now they also believe in the nirvana, which means that after the death, when you were actually very good, then you can be rebirthed into a higher conscious state. For an example, the belief is that if you were a good person in your life, and if you die, then you can be rebirthed in someone else or something else. And this is what they call the reincarnation, where you can be incarnated again to something that's much more better than what you have been. So your life after death can be much better than it was in your present, or it might be worse. So it's very important, and through this, before that, one must first reach that enlightenment stage throughout your life, and your action must actually speak much more louder than what your words speak. And this is the whole belief of the Buddhists, that there is a rebirth, there is a reincarnation after your death. Now the Christian belief is just almost the same, but the belief is that there is a heaven and a hell, that your action in this life will actually determine what kind of life you will live after your death. So if you have sinned and you had a very bad life, and you live very far from God, that in your death you might go to hell. But if you've been a Christian and you've obeyed the rules and the commandment of the Bible and God, and you believe in His Son Jesus, that after death you will go to heaven. So this is the belief of the Christians. Now, in your assignment, you have to compare the two, the Buddhist belief and the Christian belief when it comes to the afterlife, and then of course then also contrast in that. Now, assignment number 7 is looking at the rights of people living with HIV/AIDS. And it will be very important that you need to look at the whole legality of people living with HIV/AIDS, and you can use Namibia as a context, or as the environment. Now, there are certain things that you have to look at when you look at the legal rights of people living with HIV/AIDS, and you can bring out the certain thoughts on this concept. The issue of victimization, very important. The issue of discrimination. and then also looking at the current legal system and instrument that are being used for people living with HIV/AIDS. Does the current legal system and instrument protect people living with HIV/AIDS? And if not, you have to discuss it. What about their health rights? Do people living with HIV/AIDS, do they have health rights? And is there any instrument or framework that actually protect these people to have access and availability to health and health services? The rights of employees, employees that are living with the disease, you have to discuss this in detail, which is very, very much more important. And of course, with each discussion that you are going to give, you have to give practical example and discuss this in detail with some practical examples. So and then of course there are very good resources that you can use. The Legal Assistance Center wrote a very good book, HIV/AIDS and the Law in Namibia. So I will encourage you just make reference to that book so that you can just discuss and use it as a resource as much as possible. And assignment number 8, you're going to discuss the social contract, and of course we did discuss social contract in assignment number 1, but in assignment number 2 you are going to look at the theory of John Locke, specifically John Locke. And John Locke is actually discussing the whole right of the citizen. Now what John Locke's theory is just in a nutshell, what he believes is that man is having this golden age where there is a state of peace, goodwill, and a mutual assistance between human beings. And secondly, he also believes, as part of man's state of peace, that man does not necessarily need to surrender his right or his right actually, and his authority and his right to an authority or to an individual. What it actually means is that you can maintain your own rights. And what it means is your right as a human being needs to be preserved and maintained by the law or by the authority. So instead of surrendering your rights to an authority or a government, that authority must protect your right. And that authority must also maintain your right through rules and regulations and by order. So the government and the law must actually protect the rights of human beings. And this is what John Locke is actually discussing in his whole theory. Now, in your assignment, you bring out the Namibian context, where you look at the Namibian citizenship, or the Namibian citizen, and the law. Now, does the law of Namibia force the Namibian citizen to surrender his authority, to surrender his free will, his rights to the government? And how does the government protect the right of a Namibian? And this is what you have to go. And is those rights exploited? Is it respected? And this is the context of John Locke's theory when it comes to social contract. And with each argument and discussion, make sure that you give some practical examples and you explain in detail, so that when you are going to present your example, your assignment, that you discuss all this aspect of John Locke's theory on social contract. So I thank you, and I hope that this presentation will help you and guide you for you to do your assignment. And I wish you all the best for your assignment. I encourage you to refer to other resources, and I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.